Yes.
We've had a period off from the record. Get a bite to eat? Did you get a bite to eat?
Yes.
Okay.
Someone on your staff brought me a banana.
Okay, that's good. I think I know who that is. I know who likes bananas. So, are you all set to go?
I
All
am.
right, for some further questions? All right. Do you have an opportunity to review your reports while we were gone?
I did, and I reviewed the diagrams.
Right. We'll get to those. Now, in the reports, the files that you have, I think at one point we were talking about reports that you had received from Mr. Martini and from Dr. Posey, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you were kind enough to let me see your file. The dates on those reports, and you can refresh your recollection, are they December 10th of 2014?
Dr. Posey's is December 10th of 2014. And the Martini one appears to be November 10th of 2014.
Okay, I'm sorry. So it's November, what's the date on that one again?
November 10, 2014.
Okay. Okay. So you then had the Martini report that on November 10th, 2014 is the date on that.
I don't think I had it on that date. I don't, but sometime after that.
Sometime, okay.
Yes.
And how were you receiving the reports? By email or by U.S. mail?
I don't recall. I got a packet in the, I think it was, it may have been, is in the mail. Maybe it was UPS, FedEx, something like that.
Okay.
I may have gotten some additional things in additional ways, but that's what I recall is that I got a packet.
Okay. So, and that would have been at some point.
Yeah, because it had some things that couldn't come any other way.
Okay, understood. And the Martini report would have been in there, is that correct?
Probably. I don't have independent recollection.
Okay. And when is your best recollection as to when it was that you would have reviewed that?
Before I wrote my report, I would have looked at it, but I really don't recall when.
Okay. And the report's December 1st, correct?
Correct.
Showing you Defendant's Exhibit JJ. You recognize that as an exhibit and as a exhibit from Paradigm.
It's an exhibit from Paradigm, yes.
Okay. And the date on that, please, is?
It's January 3rd, 2015.
And does this appear to be a report?
Yes, it's a report.
Okay. In looking at it, just briefly, does it appear to be at least generally consistent with what you received, or?
Well, it's obviously got a different date on it, and so I don't know. It looks in general like it, but I don't know what changes there have been made in it.
Okay, thank you. And when you wrote your report then, we were talking about your first paragraph here on the second page. Erica, please.
Yes.
And you have that in front of you?
Yes.
Where we were discussing the trajectories from the hood as well as from the trunk of the zone car?
Yes.
Okay. Is that your language, or did you receive that language from Mr. Martini?
That's not my language. Probably from Martini. I also looked at Ohio BCI, but I think it was the Martini report.
Okay. Did you also see in Dr. Posey's report that you received, similar language?
I don't recall.
Okay.
I didn't review Dr. Posey's report for today.
Okay, but you did receive it, correct?
I received a report.
December 10th.
Well, December 10th, but I thought I had it before I wrote my report.
Is it possible there was another draft prior to that date then?
It's possible, or maybe I saw it afterwards. I'm not sure.
Okay, but you thought you had seen it before?
I thought I had seen it before. Well, in fact, when I wrote it, I said that I had seen a report, yes.
Okay, so that's even in your...
It's in my own report that I had seen his report.
Okay, so several or at least a couple of drafts during that period of time?
It would have been one.
Okay. And then showing you Dr. Posey's report, can you tell us the date on the top of that?
This one is January 4th, 2015.
Okay, which was after the December 10th, after your December
Correct.
1st.
Correct.
After you would have seen it in preparation for your December 1st report, you think?
Correct.
So this language where you're talking about front to back, very slightly right to left, and or very slightly left to right to almost straight on and downward. That's the trajectory language that you have.
Yes.
That is consistent with the hood of the Malibu in your report.
The front to back, slightly right to left, or very slightly right to left, very slightly left to right, and almost straight on and downward?
Yes, that language.
Yes.
Okay. So is that your language?
No.
Okay. That's language you incorporated into your report.
Correct.
As being where Mr. Brelo was in relation to those trajectories.
Was felt to be, yes.
And your wounds that you noted, Doctor, in your report and on your documentation are consistent then with the findings of or the language that you had received from either Dr. Posey or Mr. Martini?
I'm sorry you lost me. Which wounds?
The ones that we discussed in complete total, all the
In
reports.
complete total?
Yeah. Well, you put that language, I'll rephrase it here, or I'll say it again. You put the language in your report as to Mr. Brelo's locations, correct?
Correct.
And when you put that language in your report, did you find anything in your review of the paper documents from the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office that was inconsistent with that language?
Wounds that were inconsistent with that language?
Yeah.
There are many wounds that don't fit those trajectories.
Okay. So, and did you make note of that in your report?
I did not.
Okay. But there were wounds that were consistent with the language that we've discussed in the last sentence. That is consistent with the Malibu trajectories from this location were front to back, very slightly right to left, and or very slightly left to right to almost straight on and downward.
That's correct.
Okay. That appears to be medical terminology. Yeah, perhaps? This is wound track information. Would you agree with me on that? We're still talking wounds, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I think they were talking position, not wound track, but they would have to match up with those trajectories. The wound tracks would have to match up with those trajectories.
Okay. And did you find wound tracks that did match up with those trajectories?
I did. I thought we went over them, and I think I made a mistake when we went over them.
Right. And so when you have the trajectories in the body can move. We've had some testimony about that from you, correct? If the body is alive and not incapacitated, correct?
Absolutely.
And if the shooter's position changes from very slightly right to very slightly left, it can also change the paths of the wounds inside the body, correct?
Correct.
So there's a change in position from the trunk of zone car 238 to the hood of the Malibu. You can, in fact, have changes in the trajectories into the bodies, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, for instance, if you have sorry. Yeah. So some of those wounds that you've noted, you've got a 8 and 10.
Okay, who are we on?
Malissa Williams.
Okay.
So you have a 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, correct?
I didn't really use those diagrams, but
Just as a reference.
okay. So you're talking about 8, 9, 10. 8, 9. Which ones did you say again?
8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Okay.
Okay? So if a person's position changes, they can in fact have different angles, correct, that go into their bodies.
Yes.
If a shooter's position changes, they can in fact have different angles that go into the body, correct?
Well, the angles in the body are the same, but the positions of the two people are different. But the angles in the body stay the same.
Okay. Would you agree that the angles 10 and 12 on Malissa Williams' mannequin, or more appropriately in your review, have the same general wound patterns?
10 and 12, yes. I have them both as left to right, front to back, and downward.
Okay. And besides the general wound patterns, the bullets that went into the body there, in a review, would you, of the anatomical descriptions that you've received, not just the general, but in reviewing the pictures and in reviewing the documentation, do those appear to have gone into the body at the same trajectory?
10 and 12?
Yes.
Approximately. The way I diagrammed them, one of them is has a little bit flatter angle. That's 10 and then 12.
Okay. So is the body there, Malissa Williams, at that time, if it's coming from one shooter, is it the body not moving if it's coming from a shooter at the same location?
I'm not understanding your question. Say it again.
I should say it better. Is it possible that 10 and 12 are from the same shooter? Let's start there.
Objection.
Sure, anything's possible.
And is it possible that wound that number 9 is from the same shooter but from a different location? In this scenario, moving from the zone car over to the hood of the man.
No, because when I spoke to you earlier, I got left and right mixed up, and these are coming from the left, not from the right. And if he's moving over from the zone car to the hood of the Malibu, they're going to be coming from right to left.
From the right, meaning this side,
From this side of the deceased person.
across the body.
Across the body.
Correct. And now these deceased people, are their bodies turned somewhat towards the Malibu?
Turned toward the Malibu, they're in the Malibu.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You corrected me.
Okay.
Turned towards the zone car?
Slightly.
Okay. And then you have the possibility that there is a shooter that is on top of the trunk of his own car, as well as then later on the hood of the Malibu, correct?
Correct.
Because if the shooter changes positions, then you could have a different wound track, correct?
Correct.
All right. And is it your opinion that Malissa Williams was incapacitated at the time that she received those wounds, 10 and 12 and 9, or do you not have enough information for that?
That she was incapacitated when she received them? I don't know.
Okay.
They're lethal injuries, and they are very quickly lethal, but I don't know the numbering. I can't tell you which wounds are received.
So
They're arbitrary.
You couldn't tell whether or not they were incapacitated at that time?
No.
Okay.
No.
In reviewing Mr. Martini's report, when you did, prior to writing his report, did you have any objections to any opinions that he had about whether or not the bodies were incapacitated at the time they received those wounds?
I didn't review his report for that reason, and I don't have any recollection of it.
Okay. But you didn't write, and certainly didn't have anything written in your opinion about that, correct?
About Mr. Martini's?
Yes.
No.
Okay. And you've opined that Malissa Williams and Timothy Russell were deceased at the time that they received the lethal injuries, correct?
The lethal, yes. Yes.
Some of them or all of them?
Some of them, certainly the ones that I've talked about, the fatal injuries that I've talked about that were not consistent with the trajectories.
And you have collective wounds here in 15, correct?
Yes.
Some of which have where the person was alive or evidence, indicia of life?
Yes. Oops, sorry. Yes.
Now, as a medical examiner, when you provide verdicts, you often will make on multiple gunshot cases opinions that the cause of death is multiple gunshot wounds, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's a collective wounds cause the death, is that right?
I often do that. I don't always, but I often do.
And even if a wound isn't lethal in and of itself, that wound can contribute to the death.
Certainly.
And whether or not that wound, perhaps, like for instance, in an arm or in another area of the body, it can contribute to the death because there's loss of blood, correct?
There may be loss of blood just from a blood vessel that's small, or just from the soft tissues, yes.
Okay. And you've seen Dr. Ween and Dr. Philo's reports on the front where they have their cause of death due to multiple gunshot wounds, 23 for one, 24 for the other, correct?
Correct.
And you don't have any difference of opinion as to the fact that these were contributing wounds, these 23 and these 24 that led to the death of both Timothy Russell and Malissa?
I do not.
Wound 11, we had talked about how there was a difference of opinion between you and Dr. Posey as to that.
On which person?
On Malissa Williams. The wound path itself?
Yeah, I don't know which one there's a difference of opinion, so I will have to take your word for that.
Okay, and again...
Wound 11 on Malissa Williams?
Right. Well, you received Dr. Posey's report, but you didn't review it afterwards?
I did review it, and I understood that there were some differences. I didn't focus on that, nor do I remember it.
Okay. Okay. Now, on the cases here where we discuss different wounds. You'll understand the issue here is that there's been some testimony regarding shooting down into the windshield on the foot, correct?
Correct.
And also shooting on the trunk of the zone car down into the hood, correct?
Correct.
And that testimony, if the officer had moved from one position to another and the person was incapacitated, those wound tracks would show a difference, correct?
Correct in theory.
Okay. So I'll just point out the model which you can see in front of you. If someone moved from this position and shot and or this position here on the zone car 238, and then moved over to a position on the hood of the Malibu, the trajectories that would go into an incapacitated body would, in fact, be different, correct?
They could be different.
They could.
Yes, it depends on so many variables.
Mm-hmm. The direction of the gun, perhaps, right?
The direction of the gun, the height of the gun, the stance of the person, the position of the bodies.
Right. Now the bodies themselves, did you note that there were some wounds to the arms?
I did.
Okay. Consistent with Dr. Filo's opinion that they could be defensive wounds?
I didn't know that was his opinion. No, I wouldn't go so far.
Because in your opinion, some of the wounds, you're categorizing them as perimortem, correct?
I categorize some as premortem if hemorrhage is described in the wound track. The remainder I describe as perimortem.
Okay. And there is some hemorrhaging in the wound tracks of some of these, correct?
It's described in some, yes.
Yeah. And you're familiar with Dr. Filo and Dr. Ween's testimony then as to which of those wound tracks were hemorrhagic?
Not their testimony. I took the information that I have from their reports, but I haven't seen or heard their testimony.
Okay. So, as the personal observers, the ones that were doing the autopsy itself, if they were to testify as to whether or not a wound that they saw was antemortem due to the hemorrhaging of the wounds, you wouldn't have a difference of opinion with that, correct?
That's not correct, I might.
Okay. And you might, especially if you could see it, correct?
Sometimes, as I think I said during my testimony, I went on the premise that hemorrhage meant that it was premortem or antemortem, whichever term you use. But hemorrhage, you can just have oozing from sites, and so it's not absolutely definitive to have hemorrhage and call it premortem or antemortem.
Right. But if they were to say that there was something that was hemorrhagic, and you reviewed those reports,
yes,
you didn't necessarily put it down as a premortem, correct?
if I saw the word hemorrhage, I evaluated it and then called it in general premortem, and I made notes under major injuries why I was saying that, such as the subarachnoid hemorrhage on Timothy Russell on number 1.
So if they use the word hemorrhagic to describe a wound path, then you would put in your report that it was premortem.
Probably.
Okay. And their testimony then can speak for itself as well as the...
I don't know their testimony.
Right. But if they said that that was in their report, you would probably have put it down as a premortem wound, correct?
Yes, probably.
Okay. And again, you don't know what they testified to as being hemorrhagic or antemortem, correct?
I do not.
Okay. How about the situations where there was a bullet to the heart on either victim? You did note that, correct?
I did. Under major injuries, if I saw that it involved the heart, I put generally, I think, what area of the heart.
So, going back to the question, Doctor, if there were evidence in the medical examiner's reports, as well as testimony from the doctors, that the wound was hemorrhagic and therefore pre-mortem, you would have characterized it as pre-mortem, correct?
That was what I was looking for. Whether I did that for absolutely everyone, I don't know. But that was, if I did call it pre-mortem, I qualified it with something like that.
Okay. So we can take a look at your documentation, your exhibits, and then compare it to what it is that they noted and said, correct?
We could, yes.
And then if it does in fact say hemorrhagic antemortem, then we can take a look at that and determine whether or not it should have been checked off as pre-mortem on your charts, correct?
No, I'm not going to go so far as to say that. I haven't heard the testimony. I'd have to review it one by one.
Okay. And reviewing that testimony, then you would be able to consult with the doctors, essentially, by reading what they have to say.
Yes.
Right? And then maybe that might make a difference to you, correct?
Yes, it might.
Rather than reading the documentation itself, correct?
Wow. If it's not in the documentation, at this point out, I would have an issue with it.
Okay. But if it's in the documentation and it's in the testimony, then you
It
might
would be more reliable, yes.
Okay. And again, I don't know if we talked about this. As a medical examiner, you have the ability to talk to people if they call you. In Texas, or if you were in Minnesota, you'd have an open door policy, right?
Oh, we talked about that. You mean defense or prosecution?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay. And Dr. Philo and Weems, you did not contact them, correct?
I did not. I was talking about attorneys.
Okay. All right. But medical examiners talk to each other, correct?
I never have on a case like this.
Okay.
It's not something I was trained to do, and I've never picked up the phone and called someone.
To consult with another doctor about their opinions?
Not on a case that's in trial, no. I mean, I certainly consult with doctors when I'm forming my own opinion, but I've never, ever called up another physician.
To ask them about their opinion?
Not when it's in trial.
But had you done that, you had that opportunity to do that, and you spoke to them, and they were able to point you to where it says hemorrhagic or antemortem, then it would have been something that you would have taken into consideration, correct?
Yeah, yes.
All right, so these, the positions on 15A, all the way through, well, I need to skip B and D. A, C, E, F, G, H, I. The general positions, then, is what you're saying match to someone on the hood of the Malibu.
Yes, A, C, E, F, G, H, and I, correct.
Okay. And then, again, when we were testifying before, you were talking about just the general right to left and downward. Malissa Williams now.
Yes.
Turning to 1248A. You had reviewed things over lunch, and you wanted to change 9, 10, and 12?
Yeah, I came up right afterwards and asked you for a pen and marked the ones, and then when I noticed,
I gave you a pen, by the way,
yes,
right?
yes, you did. Yes, you did. And so I marked them on here, and as I was doing that, I noticed 9, 10, and 12 are all left to right. If you're sitting in the vehicle, I mixed them up when I was testifying. because I mixed them up.
Right. So you're just going here on the general wound track, left to right, correct?
Left to right, front to back, and downward. And if it had said, I was thinking in my head, the right to left, which I have on my diagram, so those are not consistent. 9, 10, and 12 are not consistent.
Your diagram says the wrong.
No, my diagram actually says the right thing, but my answer to you was incorrect.
So this, turning them on to the past a little bit. So you have 9, 10, 11, and 12. And they all seem to be going off to the left, correct?
Correct.
So if the bodies were, in fact, turned like we talked about, we can turn the picture, slumped, not slumped, but turned facing the right side of the car. That's the bodies are turned, again, that affects the wound track, correct? The trajectories of the bodies.
Again, it affects the trajectories. It doesn't affect the wound track. The wound track's going to stay the same,
Okay.
but whether it matches up or not.
Right. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay. All right. There are some wounds that you just can't tell if it's pre or post-mortem because it could be muscle, correct?
Because it could be what?
Could be muscle. If you go through muscle, does it leave less hemorrhaging?
Telling whether they're pre-mortem or post-mortem, I don't think has much to do with muscle at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's the number of wounds and the number of injuries in this case that just makes it impossible to tell, except for where I spoke about using the demonstrated hemorrhage.
Right. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 853. It's a picture of Malissa Williams. Do you see?
I see.
Okay. And on picture 853, which is wound number 10?
Without additional time, the best I can tell from my diagram, this wound right here would be wound number 10.
Okay. And again, I understand you're looking at paper. It's not as easy. You weren't there at the time. I'm walking over to the model pad. This is the one that you pointed out. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that's a regular shape. Is that right?
I was just about to look at that. Irregular laceration, anterior right paramedial thorax.
Okay, that's the right spot there.
That appears to be, yes.
Okay, and it's an irregular wound. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that would cause some damage to the heart. Is that correct?
That one, if that is indeed number 10, there's a laceration of the superior vena cava and at the junction with the right atrium.
Okay, and that is where, Doctor?
Oh, sorry, it's the superior vena cava it drains blood from up above the heart, and then it joins with the non-pumping chamber on the right side of the heart.
Okay, so it has shot that part of Of the heart or right above it?
I'm sorry, what?
Where is it? Where's the shot gone? Into the heart or right above?
It's right at the junction of the superior vena cava and the right atrium. So the right atrium is part of the heart. Oh,
Got a diagram for it?
sure.
This says right atrium here, is that correct?
Correct, and right above it
Yes.
is the superior vena cava.
And that's what we're talking about.
It's the junction between the two.
Okay.
Go down. Go down, go down, go down, go down. Right there.
Okay. So you would put it there?
No, no. Where you were a minute ago. Yeah.
Okay. And what's the cause of that? What happens after someone gets shot right there?
They lose blood.
Mm-hmm. And their heart is still pumping?
The heart continues to pump.
It's pumping on this side over here. Is that right? Or where? Where's the pumping?
The major pumping chambers are the blue, the inferior blue, and the inferior red, the right ventricle and the lateral, and the left ventricle.
Okay. Am I pointing in the right area about?
Down a little bit. Yeah. Well, no. Over. Do you want me to come down there?
No.
Okay. Right there.
Okay. Good?
Yes.
All right.
That's the right ventricle.
Yes. And then?
And then the left ventricle is the red, right adjacent to that.
So these two spots, correct? About?
For the two major pumping chambers, yes.
Yes. Okay. And then pumping happens, and where does the blood go from there?
Where does the blood go?
After it pumps.
Well, it depends. If it's on the right side, it's going into the lungs. If it's on the left side, it goes into the aorta, and then it supplies oxygenated blood to the brain and every place else.
Okay. So you shoot the heart, you start to die, correct?
Correct.
It can still pump, though, correct?
It can still pump.
Okay. I noted on your report on page 1 that you had reviewed the East Cleveland Fire Department's reports, where the East Cleveland Fire Department's reports found Timothy Russell and Malissa Williams to be pulseless apnea, correct?
Pulseless, yes.
Okay.
Pulseless and apneic, yes.
And apneic, okay. All right. And they're doing their jobs to see if there's life to be able to treat, is that correct?
That's correct.
So if there's no pulse, is there no life then?
I'm not sure if you want the simple answer or the long answer. There's no life for them, but if you're going to be a tissue donor, there's still life because tissues die at different rates.
Okay. So if there's a pulse, the pulse is caused by the beating heart?
If there's a pulse, the pulse is caused by the beating heart, correct?
Okay. And so there's life, correct?
So there's signs of life, correct?
Heart's pumping, blood's going out of the heart when it pumps, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So this wound here is the blood coming out of the heart or coming back to the heart in the wound that we were talking about, number 10.
Say the question again, you've lost me.
Wound number 10.
Okay.
There's a wound, and is blood able to leave the heart at that time?
Through the wound?
Yes.
Yes, either pumping or just passively.
Okay.
Either way. Because there's a hole.
And some of that would then be going to the body, correct?
Going to?
The body, other areas of the body?
Away from the heart, yes.
Okay. And away from the heart to what areas? Where does it go at that point?
It depends. It may go into the pericardial sac, the sac surrounding the heart. If there's a hole in the sac, it may leak out into the pleural cavities. On the right, it would probably be on the right. It may be, in some adjacent tissues.
Okay. So at that point in time, even though the person's been shot, they're still living, perhaps not for a long period of time, correct?
We're talking about the wound all by itself?
Yes, in and of itself.
Yes.
How much? A couple of minutes?
That's variable. Depends on their underlying health. It could be that they Could be. It could be they, lose consciousness much sooner than that. The heart might continue to beat, but it's really variable from person to person.
Sure. And if they lose consciousness, it still means they're alive, correct?
From this wound by itself?
Yes.
For a period of time.
Right.
Not very, very long, usually.
Unconscious before death, correct?
Unconscious.
Would you go unconscious from
With this wound?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then, if you're unconscious, you can't move at that point. Is that correct?
Correct.
How about, Doctor, wound number 9? This is a wound that also hit the heart. Is that correct? The ascending aorta.
It hit the large artery coming from the major pumping chamber.
You've seen pictures of the car, and have you seen trajectories from the car?
Which car?
The Malibu and a person on the top of the zone car. Have you seen a
Yes.
trajectory rod
Yes.
with a person holding a gun going to the car, or putting his hands out, I should say, as if he were holding a gun, going to the car with a string to a trajectory rod into what's called an A-pillar of the car? Does that sound familiar to you?
It's yes,
Yeah.
somewhat familiar. I didn't. I don't have that, in my memory.
Okay, but it sounds as if you would have seen that. Is
Yes.
that correct? Okay. Prior to your report, after your report?
Most likely prior to.
Okay. And are you aware that that's Dr. Filo's opinion that shot there is the shot that caused wound number 10?
No, I don't know that.
You wouldn't have any evidence to the contrary, would you?
I can't say one way or the other without doing some fairly extensive review. I just don't know.
Okay. Fair to say, making a point for the record, you weren't there at the scene like Dr. Filo was and Dr. Weems at the time that this occurred, and the bodies were there, or at a reconstruction where this officer depicted in State's Exhibit 798 was. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So you couldn't make any determination whether or not that there's any evidence to contradict that wound number 10 would be caused by a shot going into the A-pillar, correct?
Let's see. Left to right, front to back. That sure looks like it's back to front to me. That looks like it's back to front to me, which doesn't match the left to right, front to back, the downward.
Left to right.
Front to back and downward, and that looks like it's, unless I have the vehicle wrong, he looks like he's back there, so it's coming from left to right, downward, but it looks like it's back to front.
When you say back to front.
Oh, wait, no, I've got it. Okay, it's front to back. Yes, okay. Okay.
Can I ask you, Doctor, about the back to front there? Did the vehicle look to you as you were looking at State's Exhibit 798 for a moment that was the back side of it?
For a moment, yes, yes.
Have you seen this picture before?
I have.
Okay. And recalling what you've reviewed, Doctor, you know this is the front of the car, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
And this is the A-pillar that I was discussing. I'm not sure if you understand.
I understand the A-pillar.
Okay. All right. Any evidence to contradict Dr. Filo's testimony, his opinion based upon a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that shock
I think it's
caused a wound?
I think it's a possibility. I can't say that it caused it. There's so many different
I asked
ways.
you if you have any evidence to contradict that.
No.
May I jump in for a moment?
Please.
When you say left to right, you mean on the decedent's body, right?
I do.
So, Doctor, you've seen
Oh,
the picture.
yeah, I keep doing that. So this is right to left. So it's coming.
Well,
I mean,
it's right to
yeah.
left for a person sitting, facing forward.
So it would have to be on the body. You're right. It would have to be right to left if they're facing forward. And so it actually would be, it's the wrong direction.
Well,
If
depending on how she's seated.
yeah.
If she was seated in what you might call the normal position, you would expect this to have a right to left wound track.
Correct.
But if her body's, you can imagine a body being in such a way that this
98.
98
It would have to be.
results in a left to right wound track on the body.
It would have to be turned around quite a bit, but yes, it could be. It could be.
I mean,
Yes, it could be. It could be.
Pardon me for interrupting.
Thank you.
And the judge was only where I wanted to ask. Again, I'm going to belabor your point. You weren't there at the scene, so you don't know how the bodies were. Is that correct?
That's correct. I only have the photographs.
Okay. And you've reviewed those photographs, and there are wounds into those bodies. And the photos themselves, if they show that the person was turned in a direction like that, as you described, that could cause wound number 10, correct?
Yes.
And do you know what Mr. Martini's position is on this after having reviewed?
I don't. I don't.
So looking, again, we talked about, the court had asked you a question about wound 10, 9, 12. If the body itself is turned, doctor, to that position where they're facing the zone car, just like number 10, number 9, and number 12 could also be caused by a shooter that's over in that position, correct?
Yes, if the body is turned presenting that left side
Okay.
of the decedent.
Yes. Just want to make sure that that's solidified. States Exhibit 853. Those are the wounds, correct? Second 10.
Wait a minute. I said this one was 10.
Yeah.
Okay, 10. So this one's going to be 9.
Okay.
And this one's going to be 8,
Okay.
according to my diagram. And it didn't do the non-lethal, what I thought were the non-lethal ones.
So you don't know which wound 11 is on this?
11 is probably this one right here.
Okay. Okay. So we're talking about those wounds, and if it was in fact facing.
This one and these 3 up here.
Okay. 8, 9, 10,
and 11.
11. Correct?
Correct, as best I can tell.
Right. So if the body is turned, okay, and I'm being
Okay.
discreet with this picture, you understand. But if the body was turned, then those wounds could be caused by somebody in that position. Correct? From somebody.
Turn substantially so that you have the left to right.
And turn, doctor, turn less substantially if the person were on top of the hood, correct? Over here. Turn more substantially if they were here,
Okay,
and turn less substantially if they were here, correct?
correct.
Now, after having reviewed our questions here and thinking about the photograph where they're turned, is it consistent with this position up here?
those,
Yes, the ones we just took.
if they're turned enough, certainly you could get those wounds.
Right. And you'd have to be turned quite even more significantly for the other.
Correct.
Up on top of the
Up on top.
light bar up here, way up high.
Yes.
Blood in cavities, doctor. Have you reviewed the amount of blood that was in the cavities?
I looked at it. Let me see if I wrote down the amount. I'd have to look back at the reports. I didn't make note of it on mine.
Are you familiar with the reports of Dr. Weems and Philo where they said what that...
Yes. I remember looking at it. I just don't remember the number.
Okay. Did you look at it in preparation for your testimony?
I did. Again, I didn't memorize the number. It's right here.
Okay. In prior cases, have you been able to review and collect blood in the cavities of people that you've autopsied?
Review and collect. I collect it sometimes for, if I can't get blood from the heart or the blood vessels, I'll sometimes collect it for toxicology.
Okay. How about collecting the amount of blood that's in the different cavities?
Oh, I always do that. If I can. It's difficult to do in the abdomen, but I always, in a case like this, collect the amount.
Measure it?
Measured.
By volume, is that correct?
By volume.
Okay. And the significance of that is it can tell you how much someone has bled, correct?
Has bladder leaked?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you did that in this, reviewed that evidence in this case, correct?
I did.
Are you familiar with Dr. Weems and Dr. Philo's testimony about the amount of time that somebody would have been alive due to the amount of blood that was in their cavities?
I am not.
Do you have any evidence that would contradict that testimony?
Since I don't know the testimony, I can't address it.
I understand. Just making sure. In your review of your wounds, including wound 11, did you review x-rays to attempt to determine where the bullets were?
I did. They were, yes, I did.
Okay. And do you do that, or did you do that in preparation for trial?
I looked at them. It was difficult. I did spend quite a bit of time looking at them. I did not look at them in preparation for trial.
You did not?
No, I glanced at them, but I did not review them.
State's Exhibit 832. 831. Those appear to be the x-rays for Malissa Williams that you would have looked at before. Do I have that wrong?
They look substantially different. I mean, they look like they're from two different people.
Oh, maybe that.
I mean, there's three here. They don't look like the same wound pattern.
Okay, so
Or the same bullet pattern.
would you be able to say of our two victims which one of that is which?
Let's see. Malissa Williams had the fractured left humerus, and this has a fractured left humerus. And it looks substantially different from this one. So without going over each projectile individually, that would be the way that I could differentiate them.
Okay. And on Malissa Williams, the one you've identified, is that would be State's Exhibit what?
832.
Okay. And on 832, can you determine which bullet is from wound number 11?
No, without doing a lot more work, I can't. Let me look and see what he said. Wound number 11 was in the posterior right lower thoracic soft tissue. Posterior right. But there were a lot of them there. No, I can't.
If you were...
There's 3 clustered together there.
Sure. And when do you take x-rays? Time of...
Do I take my...
Or does your team, somebody...
Yes, yes.
At the time that you're doing an autopsy or right beforehand?
Not every case, but certainly a case like this we would.
Where there's gunshot wounds?
Gunshot wounds, yes.
Okay. And expected to find something like this inside?
Yes.
And the purpose of that is to attempt to determine what the bullet paths are on the wounds? Is that helpful?
It's sometimes helpful. It just basically shows us where they are so that when we're doing the autopsy and determining the wound path, we can see it helps with the location.
Mm-hmm. And
but it's an ongoing process. It doesn't just instantly.
Right. So when you do that, and is it assistive? Is it helpful in order to find where the pellet is, or where you expect to find it?
Where the projectiles are?
Yeah.
It's helpful. It's very helpful to have x-rays.
Okay. And if you are the person doing the autopsy and you do that, then you know exactly where to look and where to observe, correct?
No, it helps.
It helps?
Sometimes I spend hours looking.
Still trying to find it?
Yes. Recently, there were multiple ones of us looking. It was in an odd location.
But it can assist you, is that correct?
It does assist, but it's not magic.
Right. So if the doctor is able to determine which one it is that they believe it is, these are 2D, correct? They're not 3D.
A lateral helps, but they're just a piece of paper, and that's basically what the x-ray looks like.
Right. So although it helps, you still have to look. You still have to
look.
Okay. When somebody is looking at wounds, hemorrhaging of wounds, now I'm sure you've looked it up at wounds that appear to be hemorrhagic in your autopsies, correct?
Yes.
And when you do that, do you feel the tissue? Do you look at the tissue? Do you look to see whether or not the blood is inside of the tissue, or if it's laying on top of it and oozing?
I'm not quite sure what you mean. I mean, we're deep in. It's not going to be exactly on top. It's a track. It's in the tissues. It's not just lying on top.
Do you open up the tracks?
I usually do. It depends on how many.
Mm-hmm. And do you look at the hemorrhaging in the tract itself?
I do, or lack thereof.
Right. And is sometimes hemorrhaging of a wound, if it's on top of the wound, can you tell that it's oozing versus it's hemorrhaging inside of the tissues?
No.
We talked about the blood in the heart. Number 9 and 10, and you have it lethal. And number 12 as well is lethal. That also hits the lax of the apex of the heart. Can you explain what that is?
There's lacerations of the right ventricle. The lax mean lacerations or tears of the right ventricle of the heart.
Where is that here?
That's the blue major pumping chamber.
Okay. And where would that wound have happened?
I don't know exactly where it was. I'd have to. I just put down lacerations of the right ventricle of the heart. I didn't make a note of exactly where.
Okay. What would have happened to the blood at that point?
If there's a hole, it's going to come out of the hole.
Okay. And would it be pumping?
If they're alive?
Yes.
Yes.
And going into the cavities that we talked about?
going into the pericardial sac and probably the right throat cavity.
Okay. If the wounds to the head, we talked about how they were Timothy Russell. Them as one is incapacitating and one as causing immediate death, correct?
I didn't hear your last.
Causing immediate death?
Yes, the brainstem one.
You can't tell whether or not that happened first or later.
No.
You have that as pre-mortem, correct?
Yes.
Lethal by itself, right?
Yes.
And there are contusions of the brain, correct?
On number 2 and on number 1, yes.
And so both of them, the defendant, Brelo, or someone else who shot them, would have shot somebody who was alive, correct?
Yes, in my opinion.
Okay. As well as all the others that you mentioned that were yes by itself for sure, correct?
Yes, with the same caveat that I've given all along is that you can still get some blood, so it's not an absolute.
When the heart is pumping, some of the blood does in fact go up north, up to the brain, correct?
If the blood pressure is high enough, it does.
Okay. And again, more evidence of life if there is blood coming from the wounds up above the heart, correct?
I think so. I'm not quite sure. I think so, yes.
Okay. If there is blood found at the scene that is coming from the ears of the head, that blood would have come from the heart?
No, it would have been, if the person was alive when it came out, it would have been pumped from the heart, but very frequently blood leaks from the ears in very dead people. It leaks into our body bags. It gets blood all over the bottom of the body bags.
And where does it come from? From the heart?
It comes from the various wounds, so it comes from blood from various places. The heart's just a pumping chamber.
And the heart pumps blood through the system, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when the heart pumps the blood through the system, if wounds are south of the heart, then those wounds might evince some oozing. Is that correct? South of the heart.
Direction doesn't have anything to do with it.
Okay. What does that have to do with it?
If the heart is pumping, then certainly if there are holes, blood's going to come out. Just because the heart's not pumping and there are holes doesn't mean the blood won't come out.
Okay. Good. All right, so one moment, Doctor. Doctor, you have some wounds on 15B and 15D that you discussed before, correct?
15,
B
yes.
and D.
Yes.
Timothy Russell. Both yes by itself as being lethal.
Correct.
Okay. And they're downward, and they're left to right, and right to left. Left to right and left to right.
Left to right and left to right, correct.
Correct. Now those wounds there, doctor, have you...
We're talking about B and D, correct?
B and D, correct.
Okay, B, I said lethal by itself. D was one of the collective injuries
Right, that caused death, all those
that contributed to
contributed to the death, right. So those wounds there, doctor, you had explained that language that you had up top are from, was from someone else, Mr. Martini, correct, on top of page 2? Top of page 2 of your report.
Okay.
When the defendant or someone shot 15B and 15D into the body of Timothy Russell, it was not immediately lethal, correct?
I'm going to separate them out. 15D, the collective injuries with that collective wound included the diaphragm, the liver, the gallbladder, the colon, the kidney. And there would have been some time, although the liver is going to bleed quite a bit. If we're just talking about, I can't talk about just that one because it's collective. If we go up to B, I can talk about just that one because it's not, at least at that point, at the first part it's not collective. The left ventricle of the heart is the major pumping chamber, and so it would not be immediately lethal, but you would probably lose consciousness within 30 to 45 seconds, even if you were healthy.
So B and D, doctor, you could drive a car still?
For a period of time, it's possible. Some people can do remarkable things, some people can't.
On either of those two wounds?
On D, certainly. On B, until you lose consciousness, it's possible.
And for how long of a period of time?
In my opinion, people lose consciousness with that kind of wound within 30 to 45 seconds.
Now, on those trajectories, are those consistent with someone shooting from the hood of the Malibu?
Not in my opinion.
And your opinion is based on the way that they were seated at the time?
The position the position that's known to me on the Malibu, the position that they were found in, and then the wound track that's documented of left to right, and then the rest of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know if 15B and D occurred after wounds 1 and 2 on Timothy Russell?
I do not.
While there's life, the body of Timothy Russell could still move left or right, correct?
Say that again?
While there's life in Timothy Russell, or I'll add, he's not incapacitated, he could still move his torso, correct?
With B and D for a period of time.
He could drive.
For a period of time until consciousness is lost.
He could turn the steering wheel.
Possible.
He could look to the right out the window or out the left out the window.
Possible, depending on all the other injuries. We're talking about these by themselves, not with everything else.
Just asking, yeah.
Okay.
And then there's no way to know if 1 or 2 happened before 15B or D, or after 15B or D, correct?
Not from anything that I know.
So when you say that 15B and D are inconsistent with Timothy Russell,
With what?
Timothy Russell being shot from a position from the hood of the Malibu or the trunk of the zone car,
Correct.
you don't really know. He possibly wasn't incapacitated at that time.
I don't really know what. If he was incapacitated?
Correct.
I've really lost you.
Well, 15B and D.
Okay.
You don't know if they happened before 1 or 2, correct?
Correct.
You don't know if they happened after 1 or 2, correct?
Correct.
1 or 2 are the things that would incapacitate that human being, correct?
Correct.
The other wounds would not incapacitate Timothy Russell, correct?
Pretty quickly, but not immediately.
Right. But enough time to still drive.
Possibly. I can't say for sure.
Okay.
And especially, and I can't take them out of context because there's so many other wounds and I have no idea when those were received.
Right.
So, I mean, in theory we can talk about this, but in reality, there's so many wounds, I can't tell you that.
Well, I want to talk about your theory of 15B or D not being consistent with being shot from the hood of the Malibu or the trunk of the zone car. If Timothy Russell was in fact alive at the time and had not yet been incapacitated by 1 or 2, his body could be turned to the right, correct? And he could have been shot by somebody in an elevated position, correct?
You've really lost me.
I will slow down,
Okay.
break it down. I'm not attempting to trick you.
Okay.
If Timothy Russell was not shot by 1 or 2 before 15B and D, he can in fact move his torso, correct?
I don't know that because I don't know about all the other wounds. I don't know that.
But 15B or D and the other wounds are not incapacitating wounds, correct?
Taking them one by one?
Mm-hmm.
But look at all the wounds. I don't know at what point they were incapacitated.
You don't know?
No.
Okay. You can't know.
Nobody can know.
How can you say that 15B and D are not consistent with somebody being shot at from an elevated position on the hood of the Malibu or the trunk of the zone car?
Given the parameters that I've already talked about, they're not consistent. Every single one of these wounds can be put into any position in any of the vehicles with a person, and there's a whole myriad of positions that they could be in. But looking at the parameters that I gave you, it's not consistent.
The parameters being?
The parameters being the location of the shooter, the location of how they ended up in the vehicle after death, and the wound track in the body.
Right. But again, if you move that body, if the body can move, then it could have been shot by somebody on the hood of the Malibu or zone car trunk, correct?
Yes, if you change the position of either the shooter or the person being shot, you can match up any of these trajectories and any of these wound tracks.
So, given those parameters that you gave us, you can say that 15B or D could be shot by somebody else other than somebody on the hood of the Malibu, correct?
Correct.
But if you take those parameters away and the person could have moved because he wasn't incapacitated or dead by 1 or 2 first, it could change that opinion, correct?
Correct.
So in fairness, doctor, your opinion that they were already deceased when fired upon by Officer Brelo is contingent upon that parameter, correct?
Correct.
If you change that parameter, that 15B and D were shot before 1 or 2, it would change your opinion. You would not be able to make that opinion that they were deceased when fired upon.
Okay, I followed you up until you changed the parameter. I didn't follow you then.
If wounds 1 and 2 happened after 15B and D,
Okay.
then the defendant wasn't incapacitated at the time he received 15B and D, correct?
I don't know that.
You don't know.
No.
You can't know.
No.
So you can't say that they were deceased when fired upon, because you can't know.
No.
And that opinion is based upon a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, correct?
Which opinion?
This opinion, that you can't know.
I think I've gone over this. The parameters that I've given, I have a reasonable medical certainty. If you start changing positions, there's so many different ways you can change. Of course I don't know.
Okay, and that's what I'm getting at. If the parameter changes, that they weren't incapacitated at the time.
No, I'm not going to say that with the incapacitated, because I don't know when that shot was given, and I don't know whether they were incapacitated at the time or they weren't. In theory, they could have done actions, but I don't know if they did.
Right, you don't know. So they could be. All right? So
Singly and by themselves, but not with all these wounds.
there's no way to tell.
No.
Okay.
That's the hard part.
So if their bodies were turned, if they were able to move in such a way that 15B and D were exposed to the hood, front, or the trunk, and that happened before wounds 1 and 2, then the victims could have been alive at that time, correct?
Given that hypothetical, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. We'll go off the record for a moment. Do you have a rough estimate?
2 to 3 questions.
You want a quick break or hold on. You ready? All right, so we are back on the record. Do you have any redirect examination, Mr. Shaughnessy?
I do. Good evening again, Doctor.
Good evening.
When you and I spoke on direct examination, I said that I wanted to confine my examination to things that you could say to a reasonable degree of medical certainty. Did I not?
Yes, you did.
Okay. And you gave Judge O'Donnell a number of opinions that you had that are contained in your report and your charts that you could say to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And there are parameters based on making an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And those parameters do include what position the bodies were in when they were found, right?
Correct.
Okay. If the bodies are standing on their head when they're found, that's a different set of parameters, right?
Of course.
Okay. So you have to take the evidence as it's given to you, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you have to take the parameters of the situation into account, correct?
Correct.
And then you can arrive at an opinion based on a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, correct?
Correct.
I also asked you on direct examination, couldn't we stand here, and now it's 8:27, And we could probably do it until midnight and come up with something that might be possible, right?
Oh, probably longer.
Okay. You could probably miss your flight in the morning if we already rescheduled, right?
Probably.
Okay. But when we confine ourselves not to maybe the moon is made of blue cheese, or maybe this, or maybe that, or coulda, woulda, or shoulda, when you confine yourself to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, you've made opinions here today, correct?
I have.
Okay. And based on the hour and the fact that I know that Judge O'Donnell is listening very carefully, I'm not going to ask you to repeat them. But they're the same now as when I talked to you a few hours ago, correct?
Yes, unless I got the left to right mixed up on 9, 10, and 12.
Well, if I would guarantee you, ma'am, Doctor, if you look at, you're talking about Malissa Williams?
Yes.
And her autopsy prepared by Dr. Philo?
Yes.
You want to look at it?
Oh, no, I don't have it mixed up on my report.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. And your report is what Philo has, right? On the direction.
I've taken it from them, yes.
Okay. So your opinions that you've expressed here today are to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And those opinions remain.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And again, we're not playing, you're a doctor, right? Do you play woulda, coulda, and shoulda? You don't play like this might be possible, right?
To a certain point sometimes.
Until you're asked for a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes.
And that's what you've given Judge O'Donnell here today?
Yes.
Okay. And those are your opinions, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Nothing else.
Thank you, Mr. Shaughnessy. Do you have any recross based on those, Mr. Bell?
No, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Bell. Thank you for coming here today, and I appreciate your flexibility.
Thank you.
We're off the record. I also commend and thank the lawyers and other participants for your flexibility as well, and particularly the court reporters. So let's plan on starting at 9 tomorrow morning. I cannot be here past 3:30 or maybe at the latest 4 tomorrow. I've already told some of the lawyers the reason for this, and Friday morning I absolutely cannot be in session. If there's problems with witnesses, and I understand there might be a rebuttal witness who's got to be on.
What is that that's going to go on?
I would expect.
With Pat. You're right, I'm going to put Dr. Johnson on first. He's the one with the travel issues. He's got to be out tomorrow. Dr. Posey would be next, and he's got a little flexibility, maybe one more day.
So if they put Dr. Johnson on tomorrow, then there's no problem. I have to put on Dr. Noel on Friday.
No, Noel is your
Is it rebuttal witness? That's correct.
rebuttal to Johnson.
Correct.
And we expect that to be how long?
But Noel is only available Friday?
Well, he came in tonight, and his flight is out at 5:45 on Friday.
Well, if Posey ultimately could stay till Friday night.
Want to move with it, I'm going to...
Well, but
Depends on what the state does.
some of these have been a lot longer than we anticipated, but we may consider if Noel's going to be short, the parties agree to put him on right after Johnson.
Noel's not going to be that long. Yeah,